I'm Kristen Rogers-Brown. I'm the department head in graphic design, and I'm happy to welcome you all to the design lecture series tonight in conjunction with Eyes and Ears. Before I introduce our guest of honor, I'm going to give a few thanks. Thanks first to Danny and all our folks in technology for helping us with live streaming the event and with setting up the tech so you can see it with your eyes and listen with your ears tonight. To Flo, who is our department assistant in graphic design and illustration. She's helping with details behind the scenes. And of course to our gallery and events folks, Marcia and Megan, and their whole teams who have helped with the installation and the staging of this whole show that you guys are here to celebrate. And then, of course, we have some wonderful artists and designers who are students who are supporting our event series in the department in graphic design here. Caroline and Morgan are two designers in residence. They're seniors. Morgan will be taking photos tonight. Caroline was checking you in, and they're about to graduate this spring. And then Hayashi is our gallery resident working with Marcia, so thanks to all of them. And there are lots of others who have contributed to the exhibition and the lecture series, and many of you have been a part of that, so I'm really grateful for the community that we're building here. Many of you, and definitely most of the people who work at PNCA, are all working artists and designers, as well as being supporters of our events. So I'm really grateful for folks who can contribute their own work, their labor, and also their art to this community and our practice. So I'm so excited to introduce Bijan Berahimi this evening. Bijan is an Iranian-American graphic designer, curator, and the founder of FISK, based in Portland. And I think you guys know most of that. His client list is impressive and long. It includes folks like Nike and A24, Claro, Toro y Moi, Boiler Room, Aminé, Paramore, and Molly Baz. But it also includes educational institutes like Harvard, Cal Arts, and us. Good to be in that company, always. And tech companies like Apple Music, Google Fonts, and Figma, and cultural institutions like the Walker Art Center as well. Bijan also works with some local faves. So for somebody who has done so much work nationally and internationally, to have somebody really contributing to our community here, working with restaurants like Akadi, and then Plant Store, Arium Botanicals, along with these big fancy clients. He's also the founder and publisher of June Magazine, a publication that highlights the arts and culture scene here. And I could keep listing all of his significant contributions to the Portland community, but that's just part of why we're here. I've had the pleasure of working with Bijan for many years now, and he has been invested in education and community building throughout that entire time, starting as a teacher and a mentor here, to co-founding this lecture series, to the countless times he's hosted events or contributed energy to student projects, interns, and inspiring the work of new teachers and designers and experienced teachers and designers. When I had the opportunity to help host this show about design in our main gallery here, Bijan was the first person I thought to call. Not only because he would approach it seriously and ambitiously, but because it would be fun. So his vision and energy are contagious, but what I'm most inspired by is his ability to improvise, to amplify, and to lead generously, hand in hand with every person he has the opportunity to collaborate with. His curatorial practice with FISK has brought over 30 solo shows to Portland, inviting renowned artists and designers from literally all over the world to showcase their work. And many of those folks remain his friends, which is probably why we have such a good crowd here tonight. Central to his practice is a consistent ability to champion the creative work of others, which comes not from humility only, but from what I feel as deep curiosity, constant growth, and real joy in the work. So I'm honored to turn the mic over to the wonderful Bijan Berahimi. Thank you.
Thank you for that very, very sweet intro, Kristen. That was very nice of you. Thank you. Thanks for everyone for being here today. Thanks for PNCA for all the support with this exhibition. Thanks to Marcia, Noah, Oliver, everyone. And also thanks for having such a diverse amount of polar flavors. Everyone, please grab a drink in the back if you haven't yet. So it's probably going to be a really big surprise, but I'm here to talk about graphic design. It's something that I really love, and I could talk about it for hours and hours, but I only have a few minutes today. So I'm just going to share like 3 projects and showcase some process on what it looks like to bring them to life. So hopefully that's interesting. And afterwards, I brought some records that I've designed that are on the back table. Please look through them after the talk. So the 2 ways that I'm going to talk about graphic design is the first is through making, which is a very, very big part of my practice and something I knew I was going to get into when I applied to design school. It's pretty clear that making is a part of that. More specifically, I myself make graphic design, something that I call image making, which is a broad way of making images, making objects, and making spaces. The second thing I'm going to talk about is not what I knew about graphic design and something that I didn't really learn that was a big part of my practice until just a few years ago, and that's facilitating. So this is a really big component of my practice as well. And that looks like facilitating people, facilitating conversations, art and design, and events. These 2 things together are an extremely powerful combination. Essentially, you can bring something from an idea to life. So for all the design students out there, don't take it for granted. You have a lot of power with your tools. So the first time I learned about these 2 things unknowingly was at CalArts, where I went to school. In high school, I was not very smart, at like a 2.7. I wasn't good at sports, and I really had no idea what I was going to do after school. I had no thought of being successful at something. So finding art school was really, really important to me in my growth. So what made the school super unique was that it had programs of all different arts. So it wasn't just design. There was dance, there was acting, there was music, there was animation, there was film, writing, and graphic design. So we were in a building with 1,000 other artists who were all making stuff and extremely passionate. They were from all around the world too. The school was the first time that the word legacy resonated with me. It had a really rich history that came before me. It was founded by Walt Disney and has had some really amazing and influential artists and teachers. Pixar was founded there, and it provided a never-ending source of inspiration for me. Emigre was a really amazing publication from the late 80s, early 90s, and a bunch of my teachers were a part of it. And Jeff McFetridge, fine artist now, studied graphic design there. So a lot of these lines of art and design and community and design were being blurred already. So through that program, I really learned that legacy was a really big driver for community for me. So to paint an idea of what it looked like to be a student at CalArts, over the span of the 4 years, we had a class of 18 people. Each year we got our own studio space, we had our own desks, and we had class in that space every day. So we basically lived there, we slept there, we partied there, we even brought our dogs there. We spent many hours critiquing each other and trying to make the best possible work. We learned how to screen print, how to be better designers, and the first 2 years was very heads down, focused on design, but our 3rd year we started to realize how important it was to kind of balance working and also having fun. So we worked a little bit less hard our 3rd and 4th years and spent more time on socializing and partying. And towards the end, we became even more focused on blurring those lines. So design really made I felt like a very awkward kid in high school. It made me feel very comfortable and safe. So yeah, design gave me a place. Here's an image of our studio in 2009. Posters are something that I love. They're something that I made a lot of at school and still make to this day. I became obsessed with school and print, and we spent a lot of time screen printing in the lab. Most importantly, I love that posters represent a moment in time. They serve as an artifact to a gathering or a performance. One of my teachers said this to me when I said I wanted to make a zine. that teacher was Ed Fellow, someone who his whole practice was based in tangibility and in print. And I thought it was kind of ironic that he was telling me not to make print. And that made me want to make it even more. Another one of my teachers was a graphic designer named Brian Rodinger. He taught production at CalArts, and I worked with him a few months after school. But he designed this package and specifically this No Age Everything in Between record package that acts as a book. And the concept was that it's everything in between of making an album. And this record was extremely inspiring to me, and he was extremely inspiring to me, the way that he approached designing objects. So FISK was founded by myself and one of my best friends, Chris Burnett, and several other classmates as a design collective in 2009 during our first semester in the program. So the main point of starting FISK at that time was to take advantage of that unique space and community. It felt really special to be surrounded by 100 other designers from all over the world who were all in the same position, learning to make and working to be better. And I think it's important that FISK wasn't founded as a design studio, store, or gallery, many of the things it is today. It was just started with a group of friends. So it existed primarily as a website where we interviewed designers and illustrators. It was also a student zine and a student collective. This is the website. And we featured mostly student work. That was kind of the focus of the website at that time. I felt like there wasn't a lot of platforms or publications that were showcasing student work, and eventually it grew to showing work outside of just CalArts. We featured students from across the country. Over the course of 4 years, we created 6 zines. They all varied in theme, size, page count, and production technique. For the first 5 covers, I asked different MFAs to design the covers. So I never designed the covers or the insides actually of the first 5 issues because I didn't feel super confident as a designer. And slowly, until the 6th issue, was when I felt confident enough to design the cover with a few friends and the inside. So this was kind of like a additional education for me throughout my school time. And the most important thing was this mix of work and play, or self-initiated work and assigned work, or making and facilitating. We worked on FISK outside of class, and for every issue we released, we would throw a launch party. We'd sell a few issues and put that money into printing the next one and buying some beer. This release party was the main reason why we continued to do this project throughout our time in school, just for that one night where everyone got to hang out, see their work in one place. So it really served the community and created a space for us to come together. And a lot of these values are still core to my practice today. It wasn't something we had to do. It wasn't something anyone asked us to do. It was just something we wanted to do. And so my thesis project at CalArts was hosting a funeral for FISK. And to me, that was going to be the end of FISK. I never thought it would be something that I would continue on after school. And I think it's really important because FISK was designed specifically for that environment at CalArts. These are a few things I learned during my time working on FISK at school. It taught me to ask for help and that it's okay. It taught me to take risks, to learn as you go, community is everything, and that space brings people together. In 2013, I graduated and I decided to move to Portland. I knew I did not want to stay in LA. I didn't really like LA, and I didn't want to move to New York. And I had interned in Portland one summer, and I just really liked how different it was from LA. I liked that you didn't have to drive everywhere. People were a bit nicer, and it was just a prettier city. A few months into it, I got a job at Nike. And to my parents, the American dream was to make money. That was very important to having immigrant parents. So working at Nike was a huge success to them. I made more money than both of my parents with my first job out of school. And then I quit after a year. My parents were not very happy about that, but I left because I was hungry for more diversity in my work. I loved learning through graphic design and the way that it gives you access to work with a lot of different industries. The notion of freelancing was very scary at that time, but I was fortunate to make good relationships with a lot of people who worked at Nike, and they were able to depend on me for projects. So moving to Portland, there was a large group of young designers who had all moved from all around the country. We were working at Nike or different agencies, and it felt like a continuation of my college community. It was a really exciting time. We were all working our first jobs, making money, having fun, and learning a lot. During this time, I realized Portland had a strong culture of food, coffee, beer, and outdoors, but I felt like it really lacked public spaces focused on art and the design community. So with the money that I was making from Nike, I made my own opportunity. I really wanted to have a space, and I wanted to throw art shows. I applied for a few gallery jobs around the city, but I didn't have any experience on my resume, so no one got back to me. So this is something that I always encourage other people to do, is if you want to see something out in the world, just do it yourself. So that's where the FISK rebirth happened in 2014. I met Michael Spiljarek, who was my gallery partner for for 6 years. He was my boss at Nike, actually, and somehow he saw something in me and took a chance to work with me. We both had zero experience running a gallery. My only experience was doing FISK at school. But our mutual interests were that we were interested in kind of this global multicultural perspective. We both weren't from Portland. Portland felt pretty small at that time. It felt very exclusive. It had a strong DIY culture, but it didn't seem very open to the outside world. So it was our goal to change that with this gallery. It was around the time there was a lot of hate towards people from California moving to Portland. So our gallery lived in these three main components I'm going to share with you today. So art gallery, public space, and residency. So the first part is the art gallery. Here are a few pictures from some of our first shows in the early days. It existed in the back of a record store on Mississippi Ave, and it was about $400 in rent and maybe 300 square feet, but it photographed really well. This was Aaron Elvis Chupin, who's an artist in LA. This was Anu Kilipananen, an artist from Finland. Sean and Aaron's two-person show. The gallery gave me this space to work with any people. First, we started with friends. Then, as Instagram became more popular, we would just reach out to people casually and send them a note. Aiko was someone who was a hero of mine in school, someone I admired from a design perspective. And we reached out to him, and he was down. And that was really surprising to me. And yeah, it was his first solo show, and he flew all the way from Germany to have this show in the back of a record store. That sounds pretty crazy to say out loud. So the whole purpose of the gallery was to kind of focus on Portland, but act globally. So we would always bring people from outside of Portland to Portland. Part of that was because I wanted Portland to become the city, this global city that I wanted to see it. And the other part was that I really loved Portland, and I wanted to share that with people who weren't from here. This was a show with Braulio Amato in our third space, and this was the first show in that exhibit. And with each show, we really challenged ourselves and the artists. We'd encourage them to paint entire walls, we'd paint posters, to really kind of take over the whole space. We really wanted to create shows that we wanted to see. And we did this with little budget. And each show we wanted to surprise visitors and just make something that we were proud of as a show and as curators of it. This is Sophie Hollington, a printmaker from London. Jordy, who's now in Australia. Na Kim. Big shout out to James for helping with this install. This was one of the craziest installations. When we first saw her work, we just thought that they were all vinyl stickers, but then she was like, no, you have to paint them. And we were like, what? Like, really? So we got a bunch of vinyl cut, and this was like a crazy installation, but very happy with how it turned out. And after a few years, I didn't really think about this when we started it, but I realized that a lot of the artists and designers we were showing either had full-time jobs as commercial artists or past jobs as commercial artists, and that kind of became a theme of the kind of person that we showed. There weren't a lot of galleries that were featuring the work of designers. This is the work of Little Cool. He practiced as a set designer in his early career before becoming a painter. So this started to become like a really strong theme in our shows. This is the work of David from Germany. He's a tattoo artist, or looking at even actual source who are graphic designers. So it was really important to us to give space to these different kinds of creatives. And this was ultimately the goal, was to promote graphic design and kind of present it in this other light, since graphic design is typically doing work for clients. So this kind of created this space for people to make work outside of that boundary. A few more photos from the actual source show. So this kind of became a theme. So Chaz is the lead singer of Totally Moi, but also an amazing painter. So we use this space to kind of connect our community, blurring lines between the studio and clients. Public space was a big part of it. I'm a big fan of space. I think it's really important. Here's photos from our first opening in 2014. I'll go through these a little bit quicker. I learned that support comes in a lot of different shapes. It can be someone giving you a project to get you through that next month so that you can fund this crazy project, or someone buying art from your gallery, or someone just showing up and being there, or even just someone coming for a beer. It could be your friend DJing at an opening. We had developed this really strong community audience through consistent programming. At first, it was mostly Nike people and agency people. Then I started to teach at local design schools like PNCA, and our audience from our client projects working with musicians started to draw a different group of people who were interested in this space. The residency aspect of FISK was something that I didn't intentionally plan. It partially came out of necessity. I couldn't afford to pay for hotels for artists in Portland who were coming from Tokyo or Germany. So instead I offered them free lodging in my basement. It was a finished basement, by the way. In 2014, we had the show with Anu. It was her first time visiting the US. It was a huge amount of pressure, and also just it was a really special experience to be able to show someone Portland and this country for the first time. Ed Fellow was a teacher of mine in school. He had a huge impact on me, and it was like 8 years later, he was staying at my house for an art show. I really treated FISK like having family over. I wanted to make the best possible experience for everyone. So it was very much about being a good host, about warmth and welcoming them, making them feel comfortable. And at first I didn't really understand the relationship of why hosting was important to me, but growing up, being hospitable is a really big part of Iranian culture. Mehmoonies, which translates to party, they're the center of Iranian hospitality, and it's something that's super ingrained in me and influenced my practice as a curator. So this is Kentaro. He's an artist from Japan. He spent 1 month at our house. It was the longest of any artist. It was maybe a little bit too long. He was like buying so many toys from Goodwill and kept having to buy more suitcases, but he became a part of our family and really loved Charlie, our dog. So we also not only offer lodging for artists who are coming internationally, we offer the gallery space as a studio for them to make work in. And through hosting all of these artists and spending such intimate time with them, this really became like a secondary education for me. Even with language barriers from some artists, I would learn about other cultures or their childhoods or their traditions, or learn how they make a painting from start to finish. Kentaro would paint with this really long stick, and I thought he was like messing with me every time I'd come to the studio. He was just like sitting on the floor painting, and then eventually it would turn into this. Until Kentaro arrived, I didn't realize that he had published a series of children's books and was really interested in children's art. So 3 weeks into his visit, we decided to host a coloring workshop for kids. So this programming started to expand based on the artist's interests. So I developed this list much after the gallery. This wasn't something I went into it with, but this was a list of things that were important to me after the fact. So we only started making videos a few years ago. I really wish we would have done this from the beginning, because photos don't move. And I'm really thankful to Noah for helping document some of these later shows. So if you haven't been to a FISK event, this is what it looks like and feels like. This is from our grand reopening in 2023. Since the beginning, I think FISK has always been a collective effort. I don't think FISK would exist without the support of other people, without all the help from all the people who have contributed to the project, contributed to a show, or just, like I said, just shown up. And it takes a lot of time to build a space or build a project. Similar to the FISK school project, each space that we've had, each year, each show represented a lot of growth. It was a lot of baby steps. Had no experience in running a business or starting a gallery. And at the beginning, no one really took us seriously. No one really came or attended. But through this, I've learned so much. I've met so many people. And I think through all of this, a really important takeaway for myself has just been to continue investing in myself, taking risks. Especially at that time when I started the gallery, I was 23. I always would just ask myself, what's the worst thing that can happen? And as long as it wasn't dying, I just felt comfortable taking that risk, dying or going to jail. I'm really scared of going to jail, but that's a different lecture. So from 2014 to 2023, we had over 35 solo shows and a lot more events. These are some of the flyers from them. For each show, we would make a product, a t-shirt, a print, a tote bag to celebrate this special moment. For the first 5 years, we didn't have an online store. We would only make 20 or 30 of these and just sell them in person. The only thing we had was Instagram. We never really had an online store or anything like that. So the gallery ended in one of its iterations right before COVID, unintentionally. Our last show was the show with Chaz. That wasn't intentional. It was something I decided the year before that I wanted to take a break from it. It just wasn't the same. And then in 2023, we closed the space again. We had reopened as more of a retail store with magazines in 2022 and hosted smaller events. I think it's really okay for projects naturally to come to an end. I think it's really important to listen to yourself and how you feel. I think projects reflect who you are as a person, and that's how they've been for me. And my interests change and my energy changes and the time I want to spend changes. In the early days, I really wanted to be at parties all the time. So that's why the gallery was very much a party. That's not the case as much anymore. So I think it's okay for projects to change and that you're always evolving. So throughout this time, I was working on music projects more and more. It became a really big part of my creative practice. So my start in music was an internship I had in 2011 at a studio in LA called Smog. It was a really inspiring experience working with the founders there, Jerry and John. It was about a 6-person studio. Jerry had worked in-house at Warner Brothers Records in the early 80s and 90s. She had worked with musicians like Madonna, Fleetwood Mac, and Paul Simon. She is an incredibly warm and inspiring mentor, especially for me at that young age, and especially as studio owners. They paid me really well. They gave me free lunch and they took me to concerts. And now reflecting on it, they also protected me from a lot of the industry chaos. This is the first record I designed that got made. It was for Tom Petty. Bless you. I think it's important to state that for me, music projects, they don't really pay my bills. There's something that I choose to work on. I balance this work with other more financially sensible projects. I've worked on a lot of really bad, low-paying music projects. I've worked on a lot of projects that don't look good and that I'm not proud of. This has been a huge learning curve for me. This was the number one question I had when I was in school, is how do you work in music? It's not like a normal job. You can't just apply for it. So I made this little chart that I'm going to share with you on some ways that this happens. This is not based on science. This is based on just what I think makes sense to me, at least. So sometimes you work directly with a musician. This has many pros and cons. Some of the pros are that it's really nice to be connected directly with the artists and hear what their inspiration is directly from them. Some of the cons are that it kind of blurs the lines between work and being friends with someone, and that blurs the lines between your 9 to 5 and how accessible they are to you, and because for them it's everything. So sometimes that kind of bleeds over to the people that they work with. Sometimes you work closely with a manager. The manager oftentimes protects artist time and space. So this is if an artist needs to focus on music. There's so many variables here because every artist is different. So sometimes artists don't necessarily want to be involved in the design process. So the manager kind of acts as this pseudo creative director, or kind of helping kind of connect the dots between them. Sometimes it's a record label. More rare these days than you would think. So many artists are independent that they're just reaching out to you directly, or their managers are, and their teams are smaller than you think. Or it could be a creative director, someone who works very closely with an artist through all of their kind of different moments, like Alicia Keys. I never actually talked to Alicia Keys. I just worked with her creative director. So again, it's kind of about protecting the artist's time. And sometimes another creative, so like another graphic designer or a music video director will need help with titles, or a designer who's too busy and has too many music projects will need help or support for a specific aspect of the project. And then this is, again, very rare, but someone who has a full-time job in music. So next question that I would probably ask is, how do you meet these people? I don't know if anyone else feels like this, but Portland is not the center of the music industry. And the answer for me was to just be a person. So during my first years out of school, I lived with my best friend Chris in a house. We used to throw a lot of parties. From time to time, people we didn't know would come to the party. So I remember the exact moment. Me and my roommate Chris were playing ping pong in the garage, and Chaz, who is the lead singer of Twirling Moa, walked into the garage with a six-pack, saying a friend told him about the party. And I'm getting nervous just talking about that. But Chris and I listened to a lot of Torio in college, and we both made eye contact when he walked in, and we tried not to freak out. We chatted just for a little bit. I took this photo, and that was kind of it. That was 2016. 2 years later, I got this text message. Here's that text message. There wasn't much communication between us. I had run into him a few other times. He was living in Portland for 2 years, and this was a really unexpected message to get. A few years later, I asked him why he had reached out to me out of the blue, and he said it was because we had a small TV in the bathroom at a party playing Seinfeld. So that was a good idea. And he also mentioned he had been following my work on Instagram and was keeping up with what I was making. Working with Chas has been the most important relationship I've had in my career. I've been working with him for the last 7 years. We've worked on a variety of projects. So one more bubble. It's the last bubble chart I'll share with everyone. But so again, working in music isn't like a traditional job with promotions or traditional titles. There are a lot of different hats you can wear and work with a lot of different people. So here is this crazy bubble chart. So oftentimes you'll work with a photographer. A photographer will often work with hair and makeup and a stylist or a set designer. There might be a music video director who would then work with an editor or another set designer. There's creative directors, like I mentioned. Then there's stage design and stage visuals, which is another parallel industry in music, and that involves choreography and lighting. And then on the design side, there's art directors, design directors, production designers, graphic designers, and illustrators. Sometimes you'll wear multiple hats and you'll do multiple of these jobs. And sometimes you'll just cross paths with them. So I think it's important to kind of know who you'll be working with. So this is kind of what we landed on. This is the final project. There's a lot of little details. Having that like kind of reference board from the start really like opened up a lot of doors when the label was like, hey, you need to do like this sticker on the front. And I was like, oh, what if it was like this magazine thing that like we're all kind of familiar with looking at? I was really excited about these kind of little ideas, like packing in all these little ideas into this record. I was really happy with the foil. This was the back cover. This image wasn't really supposed to be used. It was a photo that the photographer took in the car driving over the Golden Gate Bridge. Here are all the lyrics. There's Chaz and his two dogs. Inner sleeves. It was really nice to be on set and kind of see the car up close because I could start to kind of think about what I wanted to make graphics out of in my head. So we made this little horse logo that acted as like this faux record label logo. So again, like I said, like I think having this kind of base of ideas just like made life so much easier as we worked through the project. I knew I wanted to do a bumper sticker and then just slowly started to refine all these pieces. Download cards normally are absolute trash in record packaging, but again, having like this kind of mood board of magazine references really allowed us to kind of make each piece kind of thought out. So like when we said we wanted to make a stress ball and we looked at the stress ball options, like of course we picked a tire. It just made everything like really easy, or like a keychain. And then started to reference some of this early tech and early visuals in the flyers. Here's the website. It's like referencing Craigslist and early eBay. It's like a weird combination of things. I was really happy with this hat. And here's the visualizer that Cole spent so much time on. This is honestly one of the best parts of the project. We made one of these fractal visualizers for every track. They're all on YouTube. And here's one of them. They're on YouTube, so check them out. So the best part about working with musicians is you get to be really close to the content. Like when you work on a Nike project, you'll work on this cool LeBron campaign. You're not like actually hanging out with LeBron and asking him what he thinks about things. I wish it was like that. But working on music projects really allows you to kind of send a silly idea via text to the musician to be like, hey, what do you think about this idea of this eBay website? And then he could just be like, cool, and then you do it. Or kind of just being really close and him sending you an idea and being like, hey, can you make a newspaper? And saying sure, and then using it for this photo, and just kind of being involved in the project is something that I really care about. And I think some of the things I don't like about graphic design is it feels so far away. And then it's like, why should I care about this if I'm so like far away from the source of the content? This is the gas pedal in the Jeepney, which I think is so sick. And again, when I saw this in person, I was like, we have to do something with it. So we made it into a t-shirt. Here are some billboards that we designed. And I think really like a music campaign is truly like a brand campaign. It's not that different. It has lots of deliverables. It has lots of pieces. And, you know, I'm really happy that I started my career at Nike because it's kind of translated a lot to my approach with all projects. We had a launch party at Braindead in 2022. Music projects are super fun. And I think, again, like without Chaz, I wouldn't have the career that I have today. He really took a chance on me. And you realize that one person can make a huge impact on your career. So working with Chaz directly led to the majority of some of the most important projects that I've worked on to date. Claro was a big fan of Chaz, and that's how I worked with her. Same with Ravina. So honestly, if like Chaz didn't hit me up to work on that project, I really was grappling with moving out of Portland because, you know, it just doesn't have the industry that LA or New York has. And I think there's really a ceiling for a lot of creatives here. But through Chaz, I was able to kind of make Portland work for myself. And again, I wanted to stay in Portland, but I think your career can often be limited by the industry here. So One of the reasons I love music is because music is a part of history. It's pretty well documented, it's pretty well archived, and it lives in the physical form. And it's easier to kind of document than graphic design. And this is something my partner Abby told me once, but that people in 50 years will be looking through records. They might not be looking at like a brand campaign or something. And I really like that aspect of music, that it's a part of history and it has a legacy to it. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the show. So the music community to me at that time was mostly my clients, their managers, labels, being around fans or friends at concerts. I was aware of other creatives working in the industry and friendly with a few of them on Instagram, but I didn't feel like I had a big community. Again, music's not really like a traditional job, so you don't really have coworkers. You're kind of often in your own space working on a laptop. PNCA, where we're at now. I've taught adjunct here from 2016 to 2020. I helped start the lecture series, as Kristen mentioned, and I've been working closely with Kristen since then. I loved being in design school. I was in design school 16 years ago, and it's something I still talk about a lot. And teaching was something I knew I wanted to do early on, so I'm really thankful for PNCA to give me that opportunity over the years. And as Kristen mentioned last year, she sent me an email asking if I would be interested in curating an exhibit, which is across the hall from here. I'd mostly done solo shows at the gallery and wasn't doing any curating at the time, so I was really excited about the opportunity. And I think having an opportunity forces you to kind of reflect on yourself, on your practice, on the industry that you work in, and everything in between. So I used this opportunity to kind of feel more connected with the music industry, create FaceTime with so many of the creatives I admired for a while. So the first phase was to dream big. I wanted this to feel different than past FISK shows. I wanted to be more focused on design and feel a bit more like a museum exhibit. I'd shared 3 different ideas with Kristen. One of them was the show on music and design, and that was the one that we all gravitated towards. I'll share some of these presentations with you now. So this is from September 4th, 2024. Just for context and the duration of the project. That's the gallery space. The show had many bad names before this one. This was the early description, work in progress, thanks to Abby. So from the start, it was important for me to kind of examine this relationship that I think is really special between musicians and visual artists. So the exhibition was intended to explore what goes into the making of album covers, music videos, and the campaigns, focused on the last 4 years. And the reason that this was my idea was I felt like there wasn't a lot of platforms who were celebrating the people behind the scenes working in music. I felt like there was a lack thereof. Like even on a Pitchfork article, the creatives or the designers, the photographers are often not mentioned. Like the album cover person is not credited. So I kind of saw this window to maybe change that. At the first iteration, I really wanted to create this super intentional listening space where people could put on a record, flip through the packaging while they hear it. That was really core to the idea of the exhibition. I also wanted to showcase like a lot of behind the scenes. I had this idea of like making a podcast where I did like a 2-hour interview with everyone. I wanted to do like a series of performances in the space. So this is kind of what the project looked like at that time, and it was a lot. This is some of the references for the exhibition design. I had this idea of like all these listening stations for each like person that was featured, so you could sit down and listen to like the 2-hour interview with them. This was like a really simple, basic floor plan. I wanted to have lectures and panels, vinyl curators, live performances, catalog. So phase 2, it was pretty hard to imagine what the exhibit would look like at that time. I was really struggling with myself and struggling to communicate it with others even. I realized that like my idea was maybe a bit too ambitious. It asked a lot of the budget, it asked a lot of myself, and also a lot of the artists from a time perspective. So I felt a little bit lost and unsure how to proceed. After talking with friends and asking for feedback, they encouraged me to simplify and that the project could be something I work on over a span of years. So this is a presentation a month later that I shared with Kristen and Marcia. So I had the most experience working on vinyl, tour posters, and merchandise. So those became for me like the core elements of what a music project looks like to me. And then I asked my friend Noah to create the music videos for the exhibit. He's someone I've worked with and admired for years. Because without the listening station, I knew it would be important for the exhibit to have an audio and moving picture component. I think that's so crucial to music, and I think it would have been really boring if you walked into a quiet space. So the music videos were really, really important. This was a bit more of a refined description of the show. Started to kind of talk about, this is like around like Charlie's Brat Summer and some other projects. Exhibition design was still like this really bad floor plan that didn't really communicate anything. Then I started to make these like really simple illustrator drawings of how I imagined the show coming to life. And then thank God for my talented friend, Zach, who started to make 3D renders of the space. And that was when everything really started to click because no one understood my flat drawings. So the 3D renders really made everyone feel a lot better and like understand what the space looked like. And this is essentially what the show is. So the table was the most exciting part of the show for me because I'd never designed a table. Again, I just drew a circle, but it ended up turning out really cool. And thanks to Boy, who were really gracious in supporting this project and taking the circle drawing to another level. These are some renders for them. So the exhibit was primarily a project management challenge. It was reaching out to all the artists, coordinating files, buying records, buying t-shirts, getting contracts signed, getting music video files. Really big thank you to everyone who helped with this. The idea itself wasn't that crazy. It was really just like the admin work of it. And the easiest part of the project was making this poster. So in the end, I really am happy with something that I brought to life that I wanted to see in Portland specifically. It's a project that I think has a lot of potential, and I hope to see through more iterations. This is a little video that we made by someone named Ethan. Thank you, Ethan.
My old highway exit looks so much different, but the water tower still looks the same. What if the town runs dry and no one else needs us? Another power outage in the rain. I didn't tell anyone I was coming home, and I stayed for 3 months. Spent the summer in South Carolina, doing what I want. Clouds as tall as mountains, it was humid as can be. Carolina sun was burning up everything.
All right, that's all I got. Thanks for listening to me. Thank you. I think we're going to do some questions now.
I've got a microphone for anybody who wants to ask a question. This is primarily because we have maybe a lot of people listening on YouTube right now, so it'll help me hear you guys, help them hear you guys. So if you have a question, just wave. Pass this down.
Thank you so much. That was great. My question, when you began, you talked about the first 6 zines that you made that were made like over a period of 4 years. And then it feels like as time went on, like your raw output just increased a lot. And so I'm just curious what your relationship with productivity is and like how that changed over time, just in terms of, you know, how much output you can do.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think through school, we really learned how to have processes to kind of make it easier to make work. And our output in school was really high. Like when we would do a movie poster project, we would have to do like 200 sketches. So it was kind of like ingrained in us. And at that time, like when the teacher would be like 200 sketches, you'd be like, what the fuck? Like that sounds crazy. And this would be like every week with different teachers, you'd be kind of getting this where we would do an image making project and you'd have to like pick an object and then iterate on 100 different styles for this one object. And you'd have a month to do that project. So I think that was a really big part of our education. And our teachers would always tell us you have to make bad work to make good work. And that's constantly why I'm always like encouraging people to do iterations, because like the first thing you make normally sucks and you have to kind of work through that. And so I think it's just been a part of my practice from the beginning. At the same time, like I often like get exhausted from working on projects so fast. So it's nice to have a balance of projects that take longer. Like the exhibition was really nice because it was less about making and it was more about thinking. And I think it's nice to kind of have that balance. But yeah, productivity has been really high since in school, and it's a good thing and a bad thing for sure.
Thank you so much for your talk. Of course, I really resonate with how much you've invested in Portland, and I am very gracious to that too. If there was someone like you going to school at, like, let's say PNCA, who wanted to be like you and do something for Portland too, what would you advise that they start doing now as a student?
That's a really hard question. I think I probably shouldn't tell anyone like what to do, and no one told me what to do when I was in school. I think like I talked a lot about legacy and about history, and I think I enjoyed so much kind of building these fantasies and these ideas of what these people's lives were like, or what their time at CalArts in the 70s or 80s was like. And so much of that felt like it was just made up in my head, and I really enjoyed that kind of fantasy aspect of it. And I think like everyone is so different, and I think like you can be so inspired by someone when you're a student, but your life and your upbringing are so different. And I think we're constantly kind of balancing these two things of our practice and our kind of like childhoods or our backgrounds. So, I think what I would tell people is maybe more vague, and to take a risk if you have an idea of something that you want to see out there. I think things can be really scary, but they get easier, and they get easier with the help of other people. So I think, I would just encourage people, if they have an idea, just do it, especially at a young age, because the more I think you sit on it, and I've seen this with friends who have had the same job for 10, 15 years, like it gets harder and harder to take risks as you get older. Your interests change. You want more stability and safety and comfort. And I think it's a lot easier to take risks at a young age. And if that means moving out of Portland to go to New York or LA, like you should do it. Those places are so inspiring, and Portland will always be here for you. And I think there's a lot of beauty and education in seeing what other cities and other places and other, people, what their lives look like. That's my like answer for you.
Hello, thanks again for the talk. And as a creative, I was wondering, how do you deal with burnout or overcome the burnout?
That's a really good question too. I think it's just constantly like learning. Like this year, I was like, I'm going to say yes to everything. And then now I'm just like, oh my God, why did I do that? I'm like super burnt out and just like tired. And, I'm a nice person. And like when someone reaches out, I'm like, yeah, let's work on this. And then like the next day I'm like, why did I say that? Like, I can't work on anything else. I'm already so stressed out and I just want to chill. So I think it's like, if you can teach yourself at a young age to say no, and like kind of like listen to yourself. Like there have been people that I've worked with that I kind of had a weird feeling about them. And I still worked with them. And like 2 years later I had a falling out, and I was like, I should have like listened to myself from the start. I think just protecting your time and just like taking time off and not thinking about design and going on walks, watching movies, like just doing like watching like bad TV, like all that stuff, I think is super helpful. And just like stop working when it's not hitting. Like I think that's something I always like, I procrastinate a lot, but I always try to give myself like a night or two before it's due, because I think it's so important to like wake up with like a fresh perspective on the work. And that's something that's really helpful for me. Asking friends, like just send it to a friend and be like, what do you think about this? If you have a close collaborator, like that's just the best. Like you'll take something that you think sucks, and then the person will like move two things around and it'll be perfect. And you're like, what, so I think like that is like probably, and even if you're really down, I think just talking to a friend who knows you and understands, there's not a lot of people in my life who like have been there with me through school and are designers and, know kind of what it's like to deal with like a tough decision or a tough moment or a big challenge. So I think like having people close to you that you really can like talk to, and it's hard to make those up. Like it's, you know, people who have been there through, for me, through school mostly. But yeah, I think just leaning on people around you.
So you talked at the beginning about being a facilitator and that being super important to your process. Obviously, that takes a massive time commitment and a massive investment for yourself, and also putting yourself out there in a way that probably for a graphic designer isn't usually the most comfortable. In those moments, because I know you briefly mentioned that there was an early point where there was maybe a lower turnout for people coming to your events. Obviously, it showed that you kind of kept doing this over a number of years. Kind of what kept you going and stopped you from being discouraged, even though there might have been a low turnout for your massive kind of investment into facilitating those projects?
Yeah. I mean, I think from the start, I really like never, like, sure, I wanted more people to go, but I never cared about people showing up. Like for me, it was like, was I proud of the show? Was the relationship that I had just formed with this artist who was traveling from another country really fun and really special? And that was often yes. And those things were the most important to me. I mean, I can't tell you like what it's like to spend a week of solid time with someone who you don't know. Like it's such a special experience to be able to share your life with them and them share their life with you. Like I really believe like when you spend quality time with people, you can develop a, you know, important relationship really quickly. So, you know, that was always like the biggest joy for me was the process of putting on the shows, the like experience of getting to know these people who are from like the other end of the world. But like you can like, again, like Kentaro, like at that time his English wasn't very good, but we had so much in common, and it was just like really, it was just like a really like amazing experience for me to kind of feel like I could develop these relationships with people. It made me feel really safe and really comfortable. Again, like I felt like a really awkward child, and yeah, being around these people and just was everything to me. And again, I didn't really care like if people showed up, and eventually people started to show up, and that was really great. But for me, the most important thing was like making something that I was proud of, both from a gallery perspective and also a relationship.
I just want to say thank you for talking. I thought it was very like good to hear the things that you said. Something that you pointed out that stuck out to me was how to learn how to let things end. And I wanted to ask you how to know, or like being aware that things are going to end, but also still taking the time to take care of it and like putting intent into your work.
Yeah, it's a really tough process to kind of go through, like when it first comes into your head that you might not want to do this anymore. I think, yeah, it's something that has also been very new to me each time it's happened. I think like if you start to complain about something, or if there starts to be like more tension or more negativity, and again, this isn't from like other people, it's just like in my own head. Again, for me, a lot of it was like not wanting to have an artist stay at our house every month for a week. I mean, we were doing shows every month, like 12 months a year. We had an artist a week to a month at our house every month. That was like a big part of it. Like just talking about the gallery specifically, it was like my lifestyle was changing, and I wanted to like focus on other things and just have more downtime. You know, at that time, like that's all I wanted was to hang out and like, you know, throw parties. And it really made sense, you know, from 23 to like 29. But like when I turned 30, I felt like a change, and I wanted to do other stuff, and spend my time doing other stuff. And also, you know, money started to mean something else to me, where I started to think more about my future. At that time, I was like, I'm making this much money, like I can just spend it on like gallery. I was spending like thousands of dollars on frames, you know, like that's not like so stupid. Like for like a 25-year-old to spend like $3,000 on a frames for 1 month, like that's what it was. And I wasn't really thinking about those things because I wanted to keep pushing the shows and make them really special and be really proud of them. So it's kind of like a convergence of all of these different kind of maybe like aha moments of like, maybe I shouldn't be spending this money on this, and maybe I should think more about like I didn't have a retirement or anything, you know. Again, like most of my practice has been pretty independent. So I think part of it was just becoming an adult and wanting to put my energy in other places. I think having made some hard decisions over the last few years, I think something a friend told me was like, I was like so fixated on just like the hard decision And then my friend was like, what does it look like when that actually happens? Like, how are you going to talk to people about it? How are you going to tell people about it? And that was a really positive experience for me, because I think like writing that out and kind of like planning in your head, like kind of shows you like whether you don't want to do it or you do want to do it. I think a lot of times we're just like gravitated towards focusing on the first step in that process. And again, like these are hard things like that we're not doing every day, you know, so they're new experiences, and, you know, you just try to be as prepared as possible, and try to think of it from different points of view, and also know that like this isn't the end of it. Like you're always going to make stuff, and it just might look different. It might be a different name, might be a different project, might be a different city. Like, you know, I think your values are still there, and that's the most important thing. Your ideas change as you get older. I think that's just a fact.
Hi, over here. I really resonated with what you said about like music doesn't pay the bills, and I feel like most designers kind of have like the work they share, and then the work that kind of keeps the system running. And I'm just curious, like, what is that work for you in your studio?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think when I was in school and people would come lecture and they would just show like a bunch of flyers or like really beautiful posters, I'd be like, in my head, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how are you making money? Like, I don't think this is fair for you to just be presenting your work like this, because like, it's not real. And like, again, my parents were like middle class, and like I had to make money. Like that was really important to me. So I knew I had to get a job, and like financial security was really important to me, because it was like my survival. So as far as like a practice and kind of managing that, like, in the early days, I was just doing any Nike work, like freelance, that I could, just to make money. And then I would take that money and put it into the gallery. And then over time, like I would build this kind of, I don't like Instagram, but like at that early stage, it was like a necessary evil for me. It was like the place where I would share work and people would keep up with me. And I would just like only share the work that I liked. And that's what someone told me like in school, was like, share the work that you want to make. And I'm really fortunate that the majority of the projects I work on visually are interesting. They could be hellish experiences or hellish clients, but like now we've kind of developed this practice that people come to me for a specific, you know, like kind of work. People aren't asking me to do like financial reports or like really like, you know, like websites. So it's something that's taken a lot of time. And again, I think there is a big relationship between the music projects and the client work, because I think like music is so inspiring to so many people. It's such a powerful kind of medium, and people are looking, you know, from all over the world at it, and people are wondering who did it. And I think like now, you know, there's a lot more blurred lines between being able to work on like a brand and a music project and like a more serious thing. I think before it was like a little bit more siloed. So I think now we see a lot more fluidity in the industry, where you can work on, you know, a lot of different projects. I mean, it's essentially the same skill set. And for me, like I've always considered myself a generalist and been interested in a lot of different things. And I've used design to kind of exercise those interests, whether it's food or music or film or, you know, we've worked on like healthcare projects, we've worked on science projects, on, you know, all kinds of things. And, you know, you learn something from every single experience. And I think industries, you know, there's a lot more blurred lines between how they look too. Like, you know, every person's trying to be cool and like sell something. So now you see like diaper companies that have like really cool branding, or like ketchup or whatever, you know, it's like, it's ridiculous kind of, but it's changed a lot in the 10 years that I've been working in the industry. Like ketchup looked like ketchup 10 years ago, and now it like looks like, I don't even know what it looks. I don't know.
I love that. Ketchup does look surprisingly designery these days.
Hi, thank you so much. So your work spans a lot of mediums, digital, print, and I was wondering how you've been able to approach projects that you've maybe never done before, and how you know, translate that into client work, and just kind of that gap where, you know, are you communicating to a client in a way where you're, you know, assuring them that you're going to figure it out, and even if, you know, say the vinyl on the truck, right? Something like that, where you may not know exactly, but you can translate past experiences, and just kind of how you are able to communicate with the client to be able to do that kind of work and get paid for it, rather than, you know, someone being like, oh, you've never done it before, so,
Yeah, it happens way more than you think. I think like my two-part answer to that is like that's the importance of doing projects for yourself, because like I had worked with vinyl in school, like not for a project but for myself, so I felt comfortable enough. I had installed vinyl like countless times at the gallery, so I felt comfortable. Like I learned those things through myself. I mean, honestly, so many of the things I've learned were because there were projects I made up. Like I don't know how to curate a gallery or how to build a space or how to design a table or anything. It's just like when they're your own projects, you can't hire someone. You have to do it yourself and you figure it out. And I think like people figure things out. I think, if you put yourself in that position, you'll figure it out. And I think the second thing is just surround yourself with other people. Like Cole was one of the first full-time employees that I hired at FISK, and Cole had a computer science background, like not graphic design. And I learned so much from Cole about websites and digital and technology. And that was like the first time that I felt like I was learning all these new skills. And it was because I was like hiring a graphic designer, but I hired like a computer scientist, which is kind of crazy, but it benefited me a lot in the sense that now I have way more digital vocabulary and feel more comfortable working on those kinds of projects. So I think it's a combination of just like learning it yourself. There are times now where I'll work on a project or someone will reach out about a project about like space design or something, and I don't feel comfortable doing it. It really stresses me out because I don't really have the tangible experience. So I just say no. Or I'll work with like a collaborator, like someone like Noah, where like I don't know how to do music videos, but I really like Noah's work, and Noah's like really good at doing music videos. So now Noah's someone I've worked with like a few times on projects, and you start to build this kind of collaborator network of people that you really admire, and people that you can depend on, and people you can learn from. And again, that's something that I feel like I've been really fortunate to kind of experience in Portland, is like these really talented people that I've been able to establish relationships with and learn a lot from.
I'm going to comment on that too. I think you talked a lot about how you still talk about art school. And like it seems like that's how FISK started, for you. So it's interesting. I think you're speaking very humbly, but you kind of create your own gravity that way too. Like if you're a student, you attract your friends around you and you have this opportunity to experiment here, and then you've developed this mindset that you've been doing for 15 years. So impressive. I thought I saw another hand over here.
Honestly, I do not have much exposure to graphic design, so this has been super sick to see. My question is kind of on the music side. Do you have any advice for like a musician as far as communicating with the designer? Because I could imagine it being difficult to kind of bring someone else's visions to life visually. So kind of just any advice there?
Yeah, I have like a lot of empathy for musicians. I feel like it's a really challenging to make decisions about how you're being portrayed by possibly millions of people or whatever, like to be able to say that I want to, express myself and present myself in this fashion, in this photo, in this way on a cover that will be again, like a part of history forever. I get that that's a lot of pressure, and I think about that when I work with musicians. I think my biggest advice would just be like try to give clear feedback and communicate clearly. I think that's like really important when someone's showing you work. I think, or also be honest if you don't feel like you can communicate your ideas clearly because you don't have that visual skill set. Like a lot of the artists I work with like happen to be graphic designers, which is kind of weird. So they kind of have that skill set, not all of them, but I think just communicating clearly, especially when you're being showed a lot of work, and when someone just reacts and kind of just says like, oh, cool, or like, chill, it's not helpful. So like, I think to be able to give feedback in a constructive way, I think it takes a lot of risk as an artist to be confident in that kind of feedback, because again, it's like leads to a photo shoot or like these things that are kind of concrete. So I think just, like sit on it, think about it, but I think just try to be clear in communication is like the thing that I always ask for from people.
So one more over here, and then I see a couple over here. Did somebody have a question over here that I missed? Okay, I'll go to the other half. I think I saw you first.
Hi, Bijan. I hope,
Hey.
am I pronouncing the name correctly?
Yeah. Nice work.
nice to meet you again. I'm Silver, and yeah, thanks for the super down to earth chat and like presentation. I really resonated with the photos that you shared from CalArts. I went there just for like a summer program, the InterSpark CISA, California's Summer State for the Arts, something like that, program like many years, 2010 actually. And what's interesting about the pictures you shared is that any person's pictures from CalArts, no matter if they went there for 4 years or just for like the CISA program or whatever, they all look the same. All of my pictures from my archives look just like that. All of the folks that I went to CISA with, their photos look just like that. I mean, hanging out in the grass, just, you know, like on that lawn, and this, just at nighttime, just like the vibe like that you described of like going in and having this really rigorous sessions of class, and then afterwards just rolling in the grass with folks, you know, like that energy and that, you just like seeing those pictures reminded me of that summer. And I feel like, you know, yeah, it hasn't been my experience in Portland as much. So I hear what you're saying about like considering moving as a designer and stuff. But I think the question that I want to ask is about, I went to CISA for, as a painter. So my background was in fine art painting before I eventually switched over to a graphic design major. And it's interesting, you're actually one of the first and one of very few designers and folks that I've seen present here who have not only talked about like art in the context of design, but actually so much of what you showed was art, and you talked a lot about painting. Like that's actually super rare for me to see, and like refreshing, like to say the least. And so my question really is, like, I think coming into design school from like an fine art background, there was this sort of like this vibe, this sort of like this energy that I kept getting from like design instructors that was like, you know, art is art and design is design and art is not design. And I've always felt like good design could also be artful, right? Like forms meets function, but also like art can and often does have function, right? Like it's so like to see you share that work is like really inspiring. And I'm just curious, how do you like, there's like, I guess this difference too between like receiving that critique in design school of like, that's too arty and not designy enough. And then you being like you even said you were working with some musician, and at some point like late in the project, you guys randomly just said, oh, let's just change the color to red. And it like, there was no like, right? It just went. And so my question to you is like, how do you like, and I see this a lot in professional work where I'm like, that's the exact opposite of what I was told in critique. And this is like all over the world. So I'm trying to figure out, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on like, I don't even know what to ask about that, but it's like, how is it, like, do you ever experience like in your professional life criticism that your design work is too arty, or like, you know, at this stage in your profession, I would imagine probably folks aren't critiquing you like that, but I'm just curious, like I've like for designers who love art or are artists or have a background in fine art, like how do you make it to where the world or whoever professionally can be okay with the art coming through your design process and like being a huge part of not even your process, but literally what you do? Like you had a gallery.
Yeah. I mean, I get that kind of like critique all the time. And that's like definitely a big challenge of, I think, running a business like where you're graphic design, where you're being hired to like service a client and sell something. And, you know, hopefully people, again, like want to work with you because they like your work, but it happens all the time where people are like, this is not working. And, you know, the project stops after a month or 2 months, or, I mean, like 90% of the stuff I made at my time at Nike and even with freelance, like it was never used. I mean, that's just like common, like happens all the time. Or the client will pick something that I don't like, happens 80% of the time. You know, it's like, so I'm constantly being let down. I think in school, like learning to iterate so much and make so much work kind of detached my feelings from work, and that sounds really sad, but I think like just from like not being sad if someone didn't pick something or if someone gave you bad feedback. So that's kind of been a part of my practice through making a lot, is just not being as attached to the work so much and just having fun making stuff. Like, you know, after being really like sad about stuff, one of my friends I was working with on the project was like, it's not about like what they pick, it's about the act of making. And that's like what I've always enjoyed with work. And maybe what relates most to being an artist is just making stuff, you know, with your friends or by yourself. You know, the difference between design and art is that you do have a client and they make that decision in the end, and that's out of your control. So I do think art and design are different. I think they use a lot of similar techniques and similar skill sets. And I think that's why, you know, we were able to make this gallery where we're mostly showing people whose background was graphic design or commercial illustration or tattooing or set design, things that are really commercial. So I think there's a really interesting kind of dynamic between commercial art and fine art, I guess. And I don't think design and art are the same thing. And that's just basically the way I was, you know, taught in school, was graphic design kind of has these structures. Again, I think graphic designers and, you know, these people, they make great artists. And I think that's why like part of me was like showing all these people, is because, you know, sure, I wanted to be an artist and I still want to be an artist, but it didn't seem like a practical way of making a living. So that's kind of why I chose graphic design. But yeah, I think, I mean, I still get, you know, shot down ideas all the time. And I think that's why I've always had my own projects, because I don't have to listen to anyone. Like, you know, no one gave me feedback on that, like making this like eye and ear. Like, this is like so weird. A client would be like, what, this is grotesque. This is like, doesn't make sense. And it's like, showed it to Kristen and a few other people, and they were like, cool. And that's like the beauty of doing your own projects, is you don't have to listen to other people or have clients, which I think is really important.
Or maybe you have clients and they're also artists. I mean, that's a lot what you've been talking about with music too. And artists have audience. So it's blurry. But you're right. I think that's interesting. I saw some more questions here.
Hi. I guess I was just kind of curious. I loved hearing about Eyes and Ears, and kind of the purpose of it was to uplift and kind of connect with fellow creatives in the music industry. So I'm kind of curious what that like outreach process was like, and like if there was kind of some dream people you wanted to work with, or if these were people that you kind of already knew before. I'm just kind of curious about the process and curating.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it was a lot of people that I had been following on Instagram and people that, you know, their work I knew of. And, you know, I would just send them a message and be like, hey, do you like mind sharing your email? I have this project I'm working on. I'd love to like hop on a video call with you. Like, it was really important for me to talk to people face to face. And that clearly like showed like who's way too busy to be a part of this show, which is a lot of people. Like, there were a lot of people whose work I really love, that I think are really important in the industry, that, you know, just couldn't be a part of the show. And I think it also speaks to the industry. It's not common for like these people to be hit up in this way or to be profiled in this way. And so many people are heads down, like working constantly. Like, I reached out to the people, they're like full time for Travis Scott, and they're just like always busy, like 24/7. And like, they weren't in the show. And then it really showed the people who were like also yearning for a similar experience that I had. And like, I think Chase and Eddie are a really great example of that. They're like two young designers who were like, I'm going to fly out for this exhibit, even though I just moved to New York 2 months ago, on their own. And that was like really crazy and really inspiring to kind of see these like young designers who were just like really wanted to kind of also shape this kind of community and make these like relationships. So it was really cool to see the people who were like super down and super supportive. And that really meant a lot to me, because it is like, again, these people are all busy, and I get it. It's like a lot to like, it's not just answering an email. It's like more than that. But like, you know, I understand like that people can't be a part of the show. So it was just really special to see the people who were a part of the show. But like, most of the curation was just people whose work I'd been following for like the last few years. There's so many people making like awesome work in music, and there wasn't a specific theme or anything. It was just people's work who I admired. So it was like kind of simple and pretty straightforward.
I've got a question from the Peanut Gallery remotely here. It's a little bit of a complicated question, but we've probably got a lot of people in the room that I guess can empathize with this too. We've got students who are in their final like bit of thesis work. You've been a teacher, you've been a mentor, but even this gallery work has been a little bit like a thesis project, like a massive thesis project. So as you're getting into the final stages of a really big part of a piece of work like that, what advice do you have for like an earlier you that had never completed something like that before?
That's a good question. Let's see. I think like just don't be scared of something that you haven't done before. Like I never made a table before, but like again, I worked with someone who knows how to make tables, so I think like not being scared, asking for help. I think also like thinking really big is great, but when you start to have to like execute that, it can be extremely overwhelming. So I think like it's really important to kind of at this brainstorm phase to just think really crazy and really wild, because you know anything is possible, but then like start to think about yourself and your well-being and your health and your resources and like where you can spend your time. So I think really balancing kind of being like impractical and practical, I think is really important, and kind of oscillating between those two things has been something that I did with this show, where I wanted it to be really crazy and I wanted to have like $100,000 sound system in there. And it just wasn't the time for that. You know, maybe there'll be another opportunity. Like I think I'm constantly, you know, shelving ideas for later. So
It seems like you're saying just because it's like big doesn't mean it's good, right? Like
yeah, exactly.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm in thesis right now, so that kind of sparked like a question for me. How do you balance opinions? Because as I'm doing my decks and my creative pieces for my thesis, I just did midterm presentations and my panel gave me a lot of opinions and advice. And how do you know like how to balance it, what to take, what not to take? I literally wanted to change my entire idea based on the advice. So, but I know it's not practical to do so. So what's some advice that you could give?
I think it's totally okay to change your project. I think my advice would be to just like only take the advice that you want. Like that's, you know, I'll have many conversations about a project and I'll ignore 90% of them and I'll only like accept 10% because they make sense to me. Like if something doesn't make sense to you, you shouldn't take that as advice because it needs to be true to you. It needs to make sense for you. So I think people will always give you advice or critique you. I think it's important to just filter out what doesn't connect, because like one person could say 5 words and it could change the whole project in a positive way. So I would just think about the positive advice that kind of resonated with you.
Yeah, one question for you regarding like the physical product of a record release. I know that like the production process is really overwhelmed right now and pretty rushed a lot of the time. So do you feel like you have a decent amount of control generally over the finished physical product? And do you have to advocate for yourself a lot to make sure that your design choices match up with the physical product as it is released?
That's a really good question. It's something over time I've learned as far as like standard materials and, you know, what ends up adding a quarter to the vinyl cost or $1 or what's too crazy. Like fortunately we live in a world right now where vinyl is extremely popular and deluxe and special edition vinyl are extremely possible. I mean, there's been so many like picture discs in the last 2 years, which is a printed record. Basically like every artist is doing those and doing small runs of like 500. Like we live in a crazy record packaging time right now, which is really cool. I know when to kind of pick and choose those battles, working with people who, again, like the first project I did with Ravina, she was like a small artist and I was like, I want to do this clear foil and a blind emboss, which like no one cares about except me. And it was going to add like, again, they were only making like 1,000 copies of this record. And I like passionately asked her and explained to her why I thought it was cool, and she was like, okay, I'll pay for it myself. And she had like no money, like she paid for it out of her own pocket, which that record's on the back and on the back table over there. And that just like was like a very unique situation where the artist is also kind of crazy and really cared about their kind of visual, you know, visual legacy. Not every artist cares about that. So I think it's just like important to kind of gauge who wants to make a really special record package versus who doesn't have the money. I mean, like the package that I worked on that had the lowest budget was the Alicia Keys project. Like for the vinyl packaging, I was like, I want to do this and that because I thought she was a big artist and I could do whatever I wanted. And then I realized that they're making like 50,000 copies, and like adding a foil stamp to the cover added like $50,000, you know, and that's coming out of her pocket or whatever. So, you know, everyone's different. I think it's good to know your boundaries and know when you can push the gas and kind of like have ideas in your back pocket. Like there's a lot of ideas. Like I really want to do like all kinds of crazy record packaging, and hopefully, you know, over the next decades, I'll be able to do all of those things. But yeah, just there's time. So yeah.
Hi. So I know there's the whole saying that like the customer is always right, but we all know that they are wrong a lot of the time. So like as a designer, when a customer is like really adamant about something that looks awful, how do you like demonstrate that to them? Like what's your process for that? Because I've had a lot of teachers that tell us that like just show them like how it's wrong. Like I'm wondering what your process for going through that is.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I don't think I'm very good at, and like something I'm constantly working on, because I've heard stories of other places where they're like, this is your one option, and I'm like showing 100 options over here, and it's just like kind of stupid. But I think it's part of it's like my upbringing. Like I'm like really nice, I think, in these kinds of client experiences. There have been times where I've tried to push for something or like, you know, fought for something I care about, and it's worked out sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. So I think I'm just not that pushy because, again, it's not my project. Like, especially if it's an artist, like, you know, there's been some battles that I've won, like the foil on the Outer Peace record, which is in the back. Like, that was a really crazy idea because the production place had never done a foil stamp over a spine. They weren't sure if it was like gonna like chip or if it was gonna work. And like Chaz didn't want to have like text on the cover, but I was like persistent about it. And that was like it worked out in that moment. But it's not something I really care about. I mean, because I'm making so much stuff, and again, it's not my project. Like, I'm not gonna like tell an artist they can't do this. It's like their album cover, you know what I mean? It's like their baby. Like I'm just there to help them. So, I mean, I think this is part of like my education, but I see, you know, design as like, I do see it as like a service industry. You have a client, you know, that's just like real. That's what you have. I think, again, you hope that someone comes to work with you for you and trusts you. So I don't know. I wish I was tougher, and I wish I was like a bit more hardcore of like, and I try. And again, it's something I'm like working on right now specifically, is where I want to be more like, especially because I've like worked on so many records, and I'm like, no, like, trust me, like really, like this is the right thing to do. Like, this is really cool. But you know, again, I'm not like, I don't want to let that kind of determine my, like, it is sad, but I try to work really hard to not be like let down or discouraged by one project, because I know that, you know, I'll work on another project. So.
Hi. I was gonna say, I love your presentation, and I appreciate you staying in Portland and like setting up shop, because I feel like it's inspiring to see it like in like 20 minutes away from my house, like FISK, instead of going to like LA or New York to do any like big like connections or make connections. Like, you can just stay in Portland. I think that's so sick. And I wanted to know, do you have any like favorite songs or song that you're listening to right now or been listening to?
I'm really into, I'm like a late Young Lean fan, and the Forever Young song is so sick. And I'm sorry, Young Lean, I love you. Yeah.
I love Young Lean. Fire.
I think we got time for maybe a couple more here.
Hi. So when working with an artist's visual legacy, as you mentioned, how do you like phase to lock in and work through that pressure of knowing that this is something that's going to be like, I guess, around for a long time, and even, I guess, not in just music, but anything that is going to be around for a long time? How do you work through that and grapple with the pressure?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I actually think about like in my making side of the practice at all. Like, again, I'm like really focused on kind of making like something that I want to see in the world. It's really like in these moments of like lecturing where you like I've been reflecting on my practice, because like I feel like as people who make stuff, like we're constantly working, we're constantly making stuff, like there's not really space in between those projects to like sit down and like, you know, debrief again when you're working by yourself or in a small studio. So it's really been the lectures where I've kind of started to be able to look at my practice a little bit more, and like this idea of legacy is kind of a through line. So I think for me, like I've always just focused on the work. That's been like the core of everything I do, and everything else has just been like, you know, based off of that, and has been, has just kind of come out of that. But I think like my practice has always been focused on making. I've never really thought about kind of like, again, that's why I didn't really care about the gallery, like being well attended at the start, because I was just like, I'm just doing this like for myself and my friends. And I've always kind of like had that kind of mindset where I just want to make something that I like. But you know, I take it really seriously at the same time. Like I just, again, like, and that's why I think with music, it's like really important to be a fan first, because you want to make something that you want to see. Like you want to make a record package that you want. Like there's nothing worse than getting a record for an artist you like and the type being super lazy, or like there not being any type, or, you know, it's just like, so I, you know, it's something I take really seriously, because often like I find a way to be interested in a lot of the projects I work on. So in that sense, I take it like super seriously, but I'm not thinking of like, how is this going to be interpreted later, or like super self-conscious of that. Like, I think it's really important to be invested in the work that you do. Like in school, like with all these projects that we hated, like our teacher was like, it's your job to be interested in the work. Like you can see, like if you don't like the project you're working on, it's not gonna be good, you know? So like it's your job to find a way, even if you work a job and you're working on projects that you don't love, like it's gonna be clear that it's not cared for, it's not loved for. And I think it's like, it's our jobs as, you know, artists or creatives to find ways to become interested in the content or the project we're working on.
Folks up here who haven't had a chance to ask questions.
Don't feel any obligation to stay, you guys. It's been like an hour and a half. So if anyone wants to leave, like,
we'll just take a couple more and then we'll be.
Go for it.
At this point in your career, I know that you don't party as much anymore, but I'm sure you've attended so many events, and some of your strongest career connections have been made at events. So I'm wondering, in your opinion, what makes a strong event?
That's a good question. I think it's the people. I think it's both the people who are there, and I think it's the people who are throwing the event. I think like its intention, I think, is like whether it's good or bad. I think, again, like a poster or like these things that kind of draw a person in, or like a collective or a group that you believe in. I think the cool thing about like doing the gallery was at the beginning, it was a lot of artists that no one knew about. But people started to kind of trust our programming and trust like our taste or the experience that we would provide them. So people would just start coming to the shows, like even if they didn't know this random artist, or, you know, then they would maybe like be a fan of that artist. So I think, I don't know, but I think like it's important for there to be events for all different kinds of people. Like not everyone is like me or like you. And, you know, I think it's important for there to be communities for everyone. So I think it's just like finding, you know, people you align with and people's whose interests are shared and mutual, and kind of just, I think it's important for like people who are, you know, aren't necessarily hosting people, because it is really hard to like have a gallery space or to have a collective. Like all these things are extra. No one's being paid to do these things. So I think it's really important as people to like support these spaces, even if you can't financially, like just showing up. Like, you know, we would have pretty crowded like openings towards the end of the gallery space, but during the week, no one would come to like hang out in the store, you know, like it was empty. Like no, who's going to come on a Thursday at 2 p.m. in Portland? So I think like if there's spaces and places that you believe in, like I think showing up and supporting them is so important, because it means so much to that person, and like sometimes can be so encouraging. Like you might not even think about it. It might seem like a small thing, but I think it's actually a really big deal.
Hello. Thank you for sharing everything and your story. It was really impactful how you were able to share your passion and how you turned that into action, and how it's made impact in like Portland, as well as like the reverberations throughout the industry and your career. My question to you is, how do you find your center when balancing the blurry lines of art and design, work and personal life, and etc.? Thank you.
like the moments where I'm like really like stressed out or kind of like feel disoriented, I'll just like look at my dog and she'll just have this like look on her face where she's just like, I don't really know what's going on, but like I'm super cute, and I'll just like nuzzle her, and that's like, I don't know, that's like the best medicine is just like a creature that can't understand like projects and clients, and just like having them there. Like I think I've had Charlie the dog for 9 years now, and it's just been a huge like, you know, stress relief for me. But again, I think it's just taking breaks, like really creating distance from the work. I think learning from your decisions. Again, they change. Like this year I said yes to a lot of stuff, and like I'm really regretting that right now. And like I need to reorient myself and what this year looks like for me. So I think it's constantly changing, and you constantly make mistakes, and you know, you might haven't. I think the thing that I'm struggling with right now is just like I'm struggling because like, you know, I love to throw all the gallery shows every month, and that was so fun, but like I'm not getting the same joy out of it. So I kind of have this like memory of these like really positive experiences and things I loved, but then I'm like a different person now. So I think it's just like, and that's why I think it's important to like stop doing projects when you're not feeling them, because like as you grow older, your interests change. And I think sometimes it's hard for like you to evolve presently with the projects when you're working on so much stuff at the same time. Like it's hard to know, like there's no lines, you know, in your kind of timeline, because it's like I'm always working on projects and they're always overlapping. So it's really hard for there to be like this really moment of like space and clarity, and it just feels like I'm on this like mountain and I'm like falling down it, and it's just like, you know, a lot of momentum. And you also want to be conscious of that, like of people that, you know, like to go to your space and want to support you, and you know, the space that you create for people in your city and your community. And it is a lot of pressure, and I think, you know, you always have to put yourself first, because again, I think like if you're in a positive headspace and you believe in something and you're really passionate for it, like that really shows in the experience, and people feel that whether they know you or whether they talk to you or whether they know about the whole story or the process. So I think it's just important to kind of like listen to yourself and know when you're not feeling it.
Going to take one more question here. And I think you haven't asked one yet, so.
Hi, thank you. I'm just curious, speaking back on legacy, how you want your legacy to be perceived.
I think on my tombstone you could just write generalist. I'll be like happy with that. Like I feel like it's been a gift and a curse of just like being interested in too many things, like starting projects and like stopping them. Like I think I'm really good at starting projects, and I'm not really good at like continuing them, because like my interests are constantly changing. Like I started a magazine that's only got 2 issues, you know, and I think just generalist, like I'm interested in too many things and I want to do everything, and I might try to, but I'll just do it once, you know? So again, I think that's good and bad, but I think in all seriousness, it's not something I've thought about really. And yeah, I don't know. I'll think about it and maybe I'll email you or something, because that's a really good question. Yeah.
Might change tomorrow anyway, right?
Yeah.
What you want to say on it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys so much for coming. Thanks everyone who's watching online. Thank you, Bijan.